But I think we're good to get started. So welcome everyone to our first discovery session of 2022. Happy New Year. These sessions are meant to help support students, businesses, and other organizations. And today we're going to be covering about some tips and ways to better advance your career. Now, before we get too into it, I just wanted to begin by acknowledging that I am currently in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And this territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship. My name is Lucia, and I am the communication specialist for DeepSense. Now, for those of you who don't know what DeepSense is, I'm going to give you just a little introduction. DeepSense is a project based out of Dalhousie University, but we work with universities and colleges across Atlantic Canada and Canada in general. We work with companies in the ocean sector who are interested in harnessing the potential of data and creating a smarter ocean economy. And we connect those companies with the next generation of artificial intelligence and machine learning experts, also known as our audience here, all you great students that we have here. We work with companies to create projects that best suit their needs, and then we find researchers and students to help execute those projects as either a master's research project, a co-op, or an internship. We've had projects in the past that were about data strategy, data processing, advanced analytics, data visualizations, and of course, AI and machine learning. So projects include topics like deep learning models to track a fish. I just shared a publication of a project on our LinkedIn, so you can check that out. We've had a prediction model for safe navigation in the Halifax Harbor, and even students create a computer model that can identify whale shapes from aerial images. So if you're ever interested in growing your skills and working on real projects and gaining some real industry experience, then make sure you submit your info to our student pool. This is where we like to have kind of a good group of students that as projects, internships, and co-ops pop up throughout the year, this is the first place we'll look. So make sure you submit your info. I'll drop a link in the chat in a bit. And that's where we're going to first look to find people who we want to work with on our projects, and we do interviews from there. So I've shared that in the chat for you. Now, today's session is all about getting you ready for the next steps in your career. So whether you're applying for a new job or a research position, a co-op, or an internship, we got you covered because the skills and tips that we're going to be reviewing today will be applicable throughout your whole career. We'll discuss how to best update your resume for specific jobs, make sure you stand out in the application process, tips on writing cover letters, and preparing for an interview. So whether you're just starting out or looking for a refresher, I think we can all learn something today. I certainly think I will. Today's session speaker is Andrea Murray. Andrea has been working at IBM since 2020, and after graduating from St. Mary's University with a commerce degree, she works as the Talent Acquisition Partner for early professionals. That means she works with lots of students and recent graduates like yourselves. So Andrea will be giving us a great presentation, and we'll be having some questions at the very end. And you can use the question and answer function on Zoom, and that's where we'll be looking for your questions. That's the easiest place for us to see them. The chat can get sometimes busy, so make sure you ask your questions in that Q&A function. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and pass it over to you, Andrea.
Hey, awesome. Well, thank you so much for the great introduction and a little bit of background about DeepSense. Helpful for me to know as well, because I'm also learning a little bit more and more about DeepSense every day. IBM has a great partnership here, so I encourage everyone to learn some more about it. And yeah, we'll start to get into what we are chatting about today. So I'm just going to get my screen ready to share here for you guys. Okay, just one second.
There's always that awkward time.
I always struggle with Zoom. I use WebEx on a daily basis. And so Zoom, you would think that I would be a lot better at Zoom when working at a tech company, but we don't use this application. So bear with me.
I'm terrible at WebEx. That one always confuses me.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. I have lots of content that I'm going to run through with you guys, probably information overload. So I'll try and keep it as brief as I can, and then that way we can have some more questions at the end for some questions and anything else that you guys want to know that maybe I didn't get to go over, or we can always go back to something if you want me to go back to some slides too. So I'm very open with how you guys kind of want today's session to run. But I'll just start off with a quick intro of who I am. I already was already lovely introduced, but I am the talent acquisition partner for IBM. Specifically the talent acquisition partner for new grads, early professionals, and also co-ops. So as part of my my day-to-day with my work, I look at resumes nonstop, all day, every day, always looking at different candidates, looking at what their interests are, the different job applications they've applied for, and then whether they're a fit for the specific roles that we are currently hiring for at IBM in Bedford. So I just joined IBM in 2020, so I've actually only been there for about 1.5 years now. I actually joined through the associates program, which is the program that I now recruit for. So I've done a little bit of a 360 there, where I was at one point recruited by a recruiter for these roles, and now I am the recruiter recruiting people like me. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I have a background in commerce and marketing, but the people that I have been working with over the last 6 months, I'd say I've been in this role, have ranged from engineering students, software students, IT students, commerce students, and basically everywhere and anything in between, since we have lots of roles at IBM within the software development practice, quality assurance testing, project management, business analyst, SAP. So those are some of the typical roles that I hire for. So I work with a really diverse set of students. So it's been great so far. And so from what I've learned over the last 6 months, I'm excited to share with you guys a couple of different tips. So we'll first go through some resume tips. We'll share some good things to do, what not to do, and then we'll also start to go into some interview tips. And lastly, we'll end off with some LinkedIn, either new information if you haven't used LinkedIn yet, or some tips if you already have LinkedIn to optimize your profile. And after that, we'll head into some questions from you guys. So yeah, to start off, I just kind of took a sample job application here. And so I wanted to share what the job application looks like with you guys, because after you graduate, or if you're in first, second, or third year, maybe you're looking for co-ops. So you'll probably be looking at a lot of different job descriptions, probably for multiple different companies, or even a couple of different applications for the same company. So I really want to start out with this because I want to make sure that everybody kind of takes the time to read through the job description when you're applying to a new job. So the importance of that, even though they might be really similar job applications that you're applying for, you really want to make sure that you're actually reading through the job description so that you can pick out the keywords that are in there, and then you can use them to your advantage in your resume. So for example, this is a technical role that we typically hire for at IBM. We hire a lot of back-end, front-end software developers. And so this is an example one where it says that the skills that it's looking for are basically students who are highly motivated, they are thriving on collaboration, and they are great at solving problems. And so you can see under the last section there, under the who you are, there's also some keywords in there, like with debugging and troubleshooting. So those are some of the keywords that you want to use in your resume. And so we'll get into that in the next couple of slides about where to put them in your resume. But they are definitely key to pull into your resume. And even if you have experience working on a code and debugging the code, and as a result, you had a properly running code. I'm not sure if that's how you say that, but hopefully the software people know what I'm trying to get at there. So yeah, that would be a great time to pull into your troubleshooting or debugging in either your previous experience on your resume or even under your education. That way you can highlight those skills that you already have that you can utilize in this job role. And then under the second part, under the what you'll do, that part's also important for your resume, but also just important for you to know what you're going to be doing, and also really key to look at before you go into your interview. And so what you'll do is, I know it's kind of like, it seems overwhelming sometimes when you're looking at multiple different job applications, especially when you're just trying to get a job for the summer, or maybe after graduation. Sometimes you just kind of want to apply to anything and everything, but you really want to make sure that you're reading exactly what it is that you'll do, because you don't want to have to like apply for a job, get selected for an interview, and then if you were selected for the job, take the job, and then not really know what it is that you're going to be doing. So it's really important that like everything that's under the what you'll do section really resonates with you and is something that you can see yourself doing. And if under the what you'll do section, if it doesn't make a lot of sense to you, or if you think you want to do it, but you need a little bit more clarity, that's when you can always like email the recruiter, or if you're in the interview, you can always ask the interviewers a little bit more about what you can expect to do on your day-to-day basis. And then if it sounds good to you, and if it's something that like you can see yourself doing, then that's great. And if it's not, then you can always be honest, and you can always share like, I might keep looking for other opportunities. But you obviously never want to be in a role that you're not passionate about, because obviously it's not going to help you grow into the future. So that's another really key part to read on the job application. And then also the first part, usually this part here is called back-end interns. Sometimes it's called like qualifications or requirements. So just make sure to give that a good read to make sure you meet all of the requirements for the job, so that your resume will actually be selected for the screening. Okay, and now we will hop into the actual resume. So for your resume, I pulled up a sample example here. And so in this example, you can see that it definitely utilizes a lot of the white space, and it's very just shortened to just one page, and it has all of the key information on the resume. So when you're working on your resume, you want to make sure that you first don't overload the page with anything. And that's where LinkedIn comes into play. So if you have like a lot of things that you've done in your jobs or in your school experience or your research projects, and you want to share a lot of that information in detail, you definitely can still do that, but you should do that on your LinkedIn, where you have more space to write. You have, you can like always share posts, but on your LinkedIn profile, you can go in and you can add your research project that you worked on, you can add your roles, and you can be really specific on LinkedIn. And then you just can tag your LinkedIn on your resume. And then that way your resume is very short and clear and covers your main points. And then if the recruiter is very interested in your resume, they'll click on your LinkedIn, and then they'll still see all that information that you want to include. So all of your information is still going to be covered, but it's just not overwhelming on one resume page. So that's one way that you can highlight lots of different experience that you have, especially if you're someone like me. I like to include every single thing that I've done, and I've learned over the years that isn't always needed on resumes. And so I really utilize my LinkedIn to be able to highlight those skills that I always wanted to chat about and talk more about. And then that way they're still there for recruiters to see. And the other thing with your resume is that you always want to make sure that you have your education and your experience very clearly on your resume. Just because when people are looking at your resumes, they want to make sure that you are graduated or not graduated. So if you're not graduated, then we want to make sure that we have your resume in our folder for our intern roles or our co-op roles. And then if you are graduated, that means you're looking for a job after graduation, a full-time role, permanent, early professional, entry level. So then that goes into a different folder so that we can clearly see that the different jobs that you're looking for. So make sure that you have your education on there. Make sure you have it clearly identified, like if you have graduated, if so, what year, and if you haven't, are still pursuing it, you could even put your expected graduation date on there as well. And then under your experience, just making sure that you only have about 2 to 3 bullet points under each of your experiences, so that in case you have lots of experiences, you can highlight more of them on the page. And then if you don't have as many experiences, you could pull in some school projects under your experience. So school projects are really good because really good to include on your resume, because a lot of the skills that you'll learn there, such as teamwork, collaboration, and kind of working on a project from start to finish, are really good to include on your resume, because there are a lot of the soft skills that employers are typically looking for. Okay. So yeah, that's just kind of like a sample resume. I'll leave it up for just another minute, but basically we're going to get into these sections here, like the statement, or some people call it a profile or objective. We'll kind of get into these in more detail, but I just wanted to show what one page of a resume ideally should look like. And so yeah, we'll get into each of the sections that are listed on the resume. And so, and this is kind of what I already kind of chatted about with formatting, but just always a good reminder to keep it to 1 to 2 pages, utilizing that white space around your resume so that you're not filling it up with words or have like columns and then bullets over here and then a table down here. You really want to utilize the white space and keep it easy to read. And then the last thing too is we already kind of chatted about this on the first slide, but making sure that when you are applying to a role, making sure that you're targeting your resume to that role. So we looked at the job application at the beginning there when we looked at the different skills that they're looking for. So motivated individuals, people who are able to collaborate in teams. We chatted a little bit about troubleshooting, debugging. So those are some of the skills that you'll want to highlight in your resume. And so making sure that they're specific to the role that you're applying for. If you're applying to an IBM role for a software testing role, and then you're applying to a different company for a project manager role or something completely different, make sure that that resume isn't the same one that you apply to IBM with, or that vice versa, because there'll be different skills on them, and it'll be hard to for the recruiter to screen your resume for the skills that we're looking for if it's targeted towards a different job. So really make sure that you pay a lot of attention to that. And now we'll get into the step-by-step of each of the resume sections. So like I said, always we're starting off with the objective or the profile statement. Basically, the goal here is for the recruiter, since it's the first thing they're going to read, making sure that you kind of include everything that they're looking for, but in a short little sentence, small paragraph that kind of highlights at a very high level what it is that you have and how it's going to benefit the job you're applying for. So a tip to consider here is that the job application is kind of like the question. So it's like the job requirements, the job description, and it's basically asking like everybody applying to this, who's going to be able to do this for what we're looking for. And then your profile statement is basically the answer to that, to you saying how you are the right person to be able to do everything that they're looking for. So I have put an example here. And so this profile statement says, as a business consultant at IBM, I quickly learned to tackle challenges by taking on a new role as a software tester in an unfamiliar field and learned industry-leading technology and software to better serve our clients. So that's a really good intro because it uses keywords like tackle challenges, and then they said how they tackled the challenge. So they tackled the challenge by taking on a whole new role in a completely different industry. And in order to do that new role, they had to learn technology and software. And then they highlighted the word clients. So that tells us that they have worked with clients and they've worked on projects before. And so going into the next section, they said, I pride myself on having a growth mindset because I recognize the value the teams gain by taking on new roles and challenges. And so this part is really key for new grads specifically, because we're always looking for people who have a growth mindset and are willing to learn new things. So like this person, for example, they were hired as a business consultant, but they had a really good growth mindset and they were really keen on learning new technologies, even though it wasn't their typical background. And so then they took on a role in a completely different department. And so that's always what we're looking for in our employees, people who are really willing to learn new things. And so if you can highlight that you have a growth mindset or any examples of when you've learned new things, that is a really good skill that you want to have on your resume. And then we'll finish off this profile statement, and it says, as a former student athlete, my values have been centered around accountability, trust, and which has given me the opportunity to work on many diverse teams. And so the last part there about working on diverse teams is a really good one as well, because that kind of goes back to the collaboration keywords from the job application, teamwork, and also that they were a student athlete. As a student athlete, they were likely on a team. And so that shows that they have a lot of really good soft skills of working together, reaching a common goal, and kind of going through everything together as a team. So that is a really good example of a profile statement. Now, I also have another one here, and this one is a little bit more detailed, but still short and concise, and is kind of answering the question of what the job description is looking for. And so this one says, I have 2 years of marketing experience working as, and you can use whatever your title was. This person's title was a customer service and marketing representative, and as a digital content coordinator. So those are the 2 titles that they work for. This obviously would be for a role that might require a little bit more experience, but nonetheless, it's highlighting that they have direct hands-on marketing experience in 2 roles. And then they say, I also have experience working in human resources as I completed a research project. And then they go on to say what the research project is, which was the effects of COVID-19. And then these keywords are good here on recruitment, onboarding process, employment opportunities, and resources for job seekers. So this person's resume is likely for a role either in marketing or human resources that is looking for those people who have worked in recruitment or worked with the onboarding process. So those are some good keywords to pull in there. And then they say that they have 6 years of customer service experience. Customer service experience doesn't sound really like exciting or fun, but it really is key and something that recruiters do look for, because customer service experience is really kind of how people kind of build their way of working with others, being able to always satisfy the customer and being able to problem solve so that the customer is happy and then that your employer is happy. So don't be afraid to highlight any customer experience that you have. Okay. Moving into your education, we already kind of chatted about this a little bit when we were doing the resume example from start to finish, but just wanted to reiterate here too. This is a really good example of how you want to set it up on your resume. You can highlight. I always benefit from using bold letters, especially if you want to kind of draw your attention to the various different types of degrees that you can kind of get nowadays. So this person has Bachelor of Business Administration. Their major is employment relations, and they went to Acadia University and graduated in 2020. So right off the bat, that tells me that they are a business student, likely looking for a consulting job or a business analyst job or any of the other kind of jobs that I typically hire for, and that they're already graduated. So they're not looking for a co-op, they're not looking for an intern, they're looking for full-time employment. So that would be a good way to set up your education. Again, if you're in your first, second, third year of school, then you can put expected graduation, May 2022. That would be a good example to use there. Okay, and so now we will go, I think I put this one in the wrong spot. Sorry about that. We're not going into interview tips yet, but we will get there. We're just going to touch on experience just quickly first. Just because this is a section of your resume that will take up the bulk of space. So for your experience, you want to make sure that you are highlighting what your role was and how long you worked that role and where it was located. Where it was located is important just so that people know if you're applying for a job in Halifax and they know that you've worked here, for the last couple of years. Obviously, you potentially might want to stay here, but if you're applying for a job like in a different, like in the States or in a different country or something like that, and all of your experience is in one spot, they might not know that you're open to relocating. So if they can see that your location is all in one spot, then you also want to make sure you highlight in your profile statement or elsewhere that you are interested in relocating or that you are passionate about living in that other area. So just make sure that you include the location on there so your recruiter can see where you've had experience before and make sure that if you are open to relocating, that you kind of address that as well. And so this person has their role there, quality assurance software tester and technical project manager. And then under this experience, they have 2 projects highlighted there. So they have a client project with a financial services company and a project with software solutions company. And so basically they have what they did on that project. And then that's kind of like the brief little description underneath their role. So the first one there says, I worked in quality assurance as a software tester for IBM's major client, focusing on test case management and software development. So that is just one quick sentence about the description of what they did. And then the bullet points underneath that are the actual, like their day-to-day, what are the tasks they did, what are the tools they used. So the first bullet is kind of saying that they've used tools like Jira, application testing, integration testing, they resolve technical issues, they assign tasks to team members. That's where you get more into kind of like the nitty-gritty of what it is that you were doing on the project. So you want to keep that section to about 2 to 3 bullet points. And you want to make sure that it's the most kind of important or relevant kind of job descriptions that you've done in your previous role that are relevant to the role you're applying for. So even though on this client project, they might have, I don't know, did something to do with like organizing an event or something, but if they're applying for a role as a software tester, not really relevant to what they're applying for. So they can leave that out. But if they're also applying to a role as a customer service like customer service representative or a project manager or even like a recruiter, then you'd want to highlight that you've done like you have experience doing event management, because those skills are going to help you in those other roles. So really, like any of the skills that you have, just kind of step back and think, are they relevant to the job that I'm applying for? Or if they're not, maybe they're relevant to a job that I'm applying for at another company and I can save it for that. So that's where you really want to kind of pull in your top 3 bullet points of what will benefit the company. So that's a little example about the experience, and just your sentence underneath just wants to highlight what you did and like what the role was, what you did, and then the bullet points are kind of how you did it, what tools you used, what skills you built. So yeah, that's a little bit about experience. I know that's a big part of people's resume, so you really want to keep it as short and concise as you can to keep the top points there, especially if you have lots of experience, you can fit more on the page. All right, and now we're getting into interview tips. So interview tips are really important because while your resume may look amazing and your application looks really good, you really it all kind of comes into play once you get into the interview. So before you go into the interview, after you've been selected for an interview, you want to make sure that you are researching the role. So you research the company that you're applying for. Make sure you're researching the correct company if you've applied for multiple companies. You can research a couple different things. If it's a big company and you're applying to a role as a project manager, for example, you could look into the company and see what kind of clients they work for, maybe how big their projects are, how small their projects are, kind of anything that's going to help you with the role. And so, and if you want, you can also, some smaller companies sometimes will have on their website, they might have a breakdown of how their company is set up with different departments. And that could kind of help you figure out who you'd be working with, what the kind of path would look like once you join the company. But in bigger companies, they usually don't have those, but you can still figure out what you'd be working with and kind of the clients that you'd be working with. And so another thing that you'll want to do while you are researching is if you know who you'll be interviewing with, you can also check out their LinkedIn profile. You don't want to message them or anything before your interview, but you can check out their LinkedIn profile and just see what company they have worked for prior to the interview or what their position is in the company. And you can come up with some better questions that way if you know a little bit more about them, their role, what they've done, and then you can ask them some questions during the interview. And also, usually your recruiter will tell you if your interview is a one-on-one or a group interview, but just make sure that if they don't, you ask what kind of interview it's going to be. Typically, it is a one-on-one interview, but if they don't tell you, it's always good to give them a call back or send them an email just so that you know you can be prepared. Because if it's a one-on-one interview, you're going to need to be prepared to answer all their questions. Whereas if it's a group interview, then you're probably going to be doing more group activities, working with other people who are there. So they're set up differently. So you want to make sure you know what to expect. All right, and this part is key. So once you are you've kind of done your research about the role that you're interviewing for, you need to practice the questions that you think you're going to be asked. So there is always going to be common interview questions in there. So you always want to make sure that you can answer questions that are asking you to tell me about yourself, or they might say, what's the background? What's your story? Who is your name? Who is Andrea Murray? Tell me about yourself. So you want to make sure that you are practicing that part and highlighting the main things that you want to share. So I would share that I'm working at IBM. My background's marketing and HR. I have a passion for working with wellness and mental health resources because that is something that I do kind of on the side and within IBM. So that shows that that's something that I'm interested in. And then anything else that's really relevant to to the job, or that's going to help the interviewer get to know you. So you could say where they've worked before, what your journey was like. I usually highlight that I studied abroad. I studied for a couple months in Ireland. So I always usually highlight that when people ask me. It's pretty flexible, but just make sure that you are prepared and know how to answer that question, because 9 times out of 10, they will ask you. Some people refer to that as like an elevator pitch too. So if you want to prepare that a little bit more detailed, you can always Google elevator pitch and then make sure that you time it so that it's only about 30 seconds to a minute. And then they'll probably ask you some questions about why do you want to work there? Why do you want this role? What strengths, weaknesses do you have to help you get to that role? So really want to practice all of these questions and use examples that you have from your previous work experience, your school experience, any kind of experience that you can pull in and share a specific example and what you did and how you helped resolve that. That's what's going to help you answer these questions. So in saying that, when you're thinking of the experience that you have, your schooling, what examples you want to highlight when they ask you these questions, there's a method called the STAR method. So if they ask you a question about, give an example of a time where you used analytical skills to solve a complex problem. So you're going to think about a time where you've used your skills to problem solve. So you're going to use the STAR method for that. So the STAR method is basically the situation is the S. And so that's when you're going to briefly describe the situation of the example that you're going to share. So the situation could be you had to use your Excel skills to solve a problem with the project plan. And so that was the situation. The task was the task that you were actually asked to complete. So if there was a particular problem you were trying to solve, you could also describe that here. So the situation is just kind of your intro to that. And then the task is what you were supposed to be doing. So on the task, I don't know, I could be trying to make an Excel formula. So I would describe the Excel formula, or I would say basically what it is, like what was the purpose that we were trying to problem solve here. And then the A is action. So this is going to be the action that you took to actually complete the problem. So the action could be for this Excel example. I don't know why I use this example because I'm not great with Excel. I should have definitely picked a better example, but for the action part that's going to be like what you did to problem solve. So for me, I could say, I really didn't know how to use Excel, and I was tasked with making a formula, and the formula had to going back to the situation, the formula had to be in the Excel sheet to make the project plan complete. So my action was, even though I didn't really know how to use Excel that well, I had to go to Google and I took a mini course on YouTube. It was free, it was a 1-hour course, and it helped me learn how to make an Excel formula, what are some of the Excel formulas that would be relevant to this problem that I was tasked with. And then after doing some of my own research, I was able to find the correct formula. So that would be the action that I took. And as a result, that's the R of the STAR. The result is basically what happened as a result of your actions. So for me, I went to YouTube and I found an example formula that I could use. I tested it out on the project plan in our Excel file that we were using. And the result was that the formula worked and it helped us be able to see our project plan or whatever it was. So yeah, hopefully that will help you guys. It's always a really good task or a really good method to use when you're answering questions, because it can be easy to kind of ramble on about the situation, or it can be easy to kind of maybe highlight some of the results, but you want to make sure that you are keeping it concise and hitting all of those points. Because while it might be great that the situation that you're explaining was a really hard problem and it was a group project, nothing was going right, you don't want to go too in depth, because you want to make sure that you give yourself time to actually explain what you had to do, how you did it, and what the result was. So just keep that in mind when you're answering the different interview questions. And then as far as like when you are actually practicing for the interviews, make sure you look up on Google what typical interview questions are for the different roles. So interview questions for a software tester role, if you just Google that, you'll be able to find a lot of questions that other people have posted or some typical software tester questions, and then you'll be able to practice them. And that way you can actually think of, what have I done that might help me answer that question? Or what strengths do I have that will actually help me as a software tester? So make sure you utilize the resources that you have, and make sure you're brainstorming what you've done so far, what you've done in school, what you've done in your previous work example, what you've done in your personal life. Any of these examples are good to help you in the interview. All right. And so brainstorm, this kind of goes hand in hand with the kind of preparing, practicing, but it is really good that you brainstorm some questions that you can go to the interview with. Now, you could get to the interview and all of your questions that you brainstormed could be answered based on what they have said or how they introduced you to it, but you might think of like 3 more questions in the interview, and that's totally fine. You can also ask the questions that you think of during the interview, but it is always good to still brainstorm questions that you actually have or that you actually want to know, that you can ask in the interview once they ask you if you have any more questions or if there's anything else you'd like to know, because it really shows that you prepared for the interview, and it also shows that you're interested. So you could have questions either about how the interviewer got to the role that they're in, or you could have questions about what the role will look like on a day-to-day, or you could even have questions about how you're going to grow in the company. Any of these questions are all very, very good, but you just want to make sure you are brainstorming the types of questions that you want to ask before you actually get into the interview. Because if you aren't actually interested in some of the questions that you're brainstorming, then there's really no point in asking them in the interview just to ask a question just for the sake of it. Because if the answer isn't meaningful for you, then you might as well just actually ask a question that you are interested in. So just make sure to kind of set aside some time to brainstorm some questions that you could be a little bit confused about what you're doing, or you could be, maybe you want to know a little bit more about the company. If it's a small startup company, say you've done some research online, but you couldn't really find a lot, you could ask them to share a little bit more about what some of their values are, what they do, and kind of what they want you to do. So definitely make sure to set some time to brainstorm some questions, and then make sure that when they ask you if you have any questions, make sure you do ask your questions if you do have them, because they're always happy to answer any of the questions that you have, and they're happy to share more about what they do. Okay. And then the last point here is just about LinkedIn. I know we're coming up a little bit on time, and I want to make sure we have some time for questions. So I'll keep the LinkedIn part brief, but just because those other 2 parts, the resumes and the interview, is the most important when you're applying for jobs. But LinkedIn is also really key, because you want to make sure that you are building up your LinkedIn profile, because people share jobs on LinkedIn all the time. You meet all kinds of new connections on LinkedIn. So you could have a teammate that you have on LinkedIn, and then they could share something about somebody that they know in their network, and it could be really interesting to you. And then that's how you meet that other person. So you do want to utilize LinkedIn. If you have it already, definitely make sure you're kind of staying active on there and finding some more connections. If you're new and you don't know what LinkedIn is, I would recommend setting up a profile, because it does really help you with finding new connections. And especially when you're on the job hunt, it will help you a lot when you're trying to learn about new jobs, trying to learn about what you like and what you don't like. You can always meet with different connections and ask them about what they like about their job or what they don't like about their job. So using LinkedIn is really good to help you get jobs, making sure that you connect with the people that you know. So you could connect with your team members, any of the students in your classes, your managers, anybody that you know and that you think you would benefit from their post. Make sure you start up a connection with them. If you don't know them really well, here's just a messaging example that you can use just to remind them of where you met them. So this one says, "Hi, Laura. It was great chatting with you at blank." So this one, they chatted at a design thinking session back in November. "Thanks for going through the concepts. I was wondering if we could chat a little bit more about this." And so that's basically saying where they met, when they met, and your action is what you want to learn from them. So you want to learn a little bit more about the concepts they went over. And so that would be a really good messaging example. And then when you're starting to connect with people who you don't know immediately, these would be called your second degree connections, and these would be through your other first degree connections, so people you do know. These would be your connections that you're getting through them. So you could be asking your connections that you have to connect you with other people, or you might, for example, see a post from one of your connections and you want to connect with them too. So when you're doing this and you don't really know them well, you do want to make sure when you're messaging them that you're being very clear. So for this one, it's this messaging example here is saying the person's name, they're studying blank at this school, they're really interested in talent acquisition, and they're really interested in working for Facebook company, Instagram company on the campus team. Could you please tell me about the company culture? What's your favorite part of your role? And what basically your action item at the end is what's your favorite part of the role and what you want to learn from them. So that's really key to have in your messaging example. And another thing I usually include too is that if you met them through someone, making sure to say, I met you through my other connection, Andrea Murray, so that they know that there is a connection there and you're not just some kind of random person that's reaching out to them. Okay. And so this last slide here is just about when you do find recruiters on LinkedIn, because sometimes people will just like share their resumes with recruiters, or they'll ask them about the job, they'll ask them about their career meaning like the candidate applying. Those questions recruiters aren't really going to be able to answer. Recruiters are going to be able to answer questions about the application process for the job you applied for. If you have questions about the culture of the company, they can answer questions about that. They can answer questions about the timeline, so when you can expect to hear an answer, what the process is like, and they can connect you with other people, but they aren't going to be able to kind of tell you about the job, tell you what you're doing day to day. They're not going to be able to just look at a resume and see if they're a fit for any random role, because it might not be the role that they're recruiting for. So you really want to make sure you know that when you are reaching out to recruiters, knowing that they only hire for a certain amount of roles, and if they don't hire for the role that you want them to look at your resume for, then it's not going to be beneficial for you to message them. You should just kind of keep looking to see what other roles that they're hiring for, if they suit you. If they don't, then keep looking for other recruiters. So yeah, that's just a little bit about how you can utilize your LinkedIn. I know that was a lot of information that we kind of went over. We're probably coming up a little bit on time. I think we only have like 16 minutes left for questions. So I'll hand it back over and I'll let you ask me any questions that we have so far.
Awesome. Thank you so much. There's a lot of good information in that presentation. So thank you for sharing all that with us. So yeah, we do have some questions. I kind of wanted to build off of the LinkedIn. So having a LinkedIn profile is important, but what about like building a portfolio online? Like, do you think it's worth having a website, like a Git repository if you're working like with code? Like, do you think those are of value too? And where to include those, I guess, on an application?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks for asking that. So yeah, I usually speak more to LinkedIn because my background is marketing and HR. But another one that if your background is in like coding and software development, if you have a GitHub or whatever your website is, or your portfolio, that is also something that you can include on your LinkedIn or on your resume. For me, I put my LinkedIn because I have no technical skills and all of my information is on my LinkedIn profile. But if you are a student applying to a software developer internship or a co-op role or whatever it is, and you have a website or a portfolio with all of your projects that you've worked on, the different kinds of code you've done, any of that kind of information, you should put that on your resume. And you can put it in the same spot that I had highlighted earlier about where to put your LinkedIn. So it kind of goes like your name at the top of the page, your location, so Halifax, Nova Scotia, your phone number or email, and then your GitHub. So you can have it right at the top as a call to action. And then that way we can go and look at it and see what you've worked on, see what you're interested, the different languages you've used. So yeah, that's a great question. And definitely if you have one, I encourage you to put it on your resume so that the recruiters can take a look.
Awesome. Thank you. Kind of talking about the resume, you mentioned like how important to have locations. What if now in COVID, there's a lot of people working remotely. So if your company now you're working at a place that's remote, like what do you put there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And a new trend that we're actually starting to see on a lot of resumes. And so sometimes for that, some people will do kind of two things. you can do like your role. So if you were a business consultant, you could do remote business consultant. And then you could put the location of the company. So say it was a company that was located in BC, but you're working remote, you're in Halifax. So you could say, like, you always have your location of where you are at the top of your resume. So if you did that, I would be able to read your resume, realize you're in Halifax, but also see that you're working as a remote business consultant for a company in BC. So you can still put the location of the company, or you can either, if you don't want to put the location of the company, you could also just put in the location part, you could just put working remote and then keep your title as business consultant. So yeah, there's a couple different options to do there, but you should make it clear that you are working remotely. Even though like the jobs that we're hiring for are also remote, they still do have a location at the end of the day of where they're based out of. So yeah, a couple different options there, but definitely do one or the other so that people can see, because a lot of people are working remote these days. So
yeah, for sure. And then back to like the resume. So you mentioned the importance of the objective statement. One of the questions we had could a cover letter cover that statement for you if a job asks for a cover letter?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so I didn't go too in depth about like the profile and kind of if you could put that on a cover letter. I don't do too much with cover letters. Some companies ask for them, some companies don't. And so that's kind of why I didn't go too in depth with the cover letter, because you could learn a bunch of skills and then your company might not even ask you for a cover letter. But with your cover letter, you could definitely highlight a very similar skill set that you're putting in your profile statement. So when we were chatted about profile statement, we chatted about highlighting the main skills that you need for the job and what kind of makes you the perfect person for that job. And so you could definitely go into more detail of those things on your cover letter. So with your cover letter, if you are kind of saying that you have the customer service experience to be eligible for that job, in your first little paragraph on your cover letter, you could briefly explain what skills that you learned as a customer service rep, and then how that's going to help you. So the cover letter just kind of gives you a little bit more space to go into detail about your profile statement. But yes, they are very similar things that you want to mention in both parts. If you have a cover letter and a resume, definitely don't take the profile statement out of your resume, still keep it, but you can just make it short and concise. You can basically just summarize your cover letter in 1 or 2 sentences. So still keep both if you're doing cover letter and resume, but just making sure that it's still nice and short. And then the cover letter is really the place that you can go into more detail.
Awesome. That's really interesting. I took out my objective statement because I was just like, oh, people don't care about this anymore, but apparently
yeah, I look at that. I like it to be like a quick little 1 to 2 sentences. Some people might not, some people might only be interested in your experience, but I like looking at people's objective statements because sometimes you'll find something fun in there. Like the example I showed you, it was like a student athlete, and sometimes that might just spark a conversation in an interview, and then you could be chatting about your football team, and that's how you kind of make some connections. So I always liked it, and it's good to kind of include a little brief piece about yourself that they might not get from your experience or from your schooling. So
yeah, kind of make it a little more personal in that way.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What if one of the questions we had come in under experience, what if you don't have work experience? Because we have a lot of students here, so maybe they've been focused on they haven't been working. How can you fill your resume essentially with that, or how to fill your resume?
Yeah, really good question, and something that we work a lot with our interns and our co-ops for. And so for the experience section, if you are like, if you've been in school if you're in a college program, you've been in school for 2 years, or maybe you're just finishing up your first year university. And if you don't have any work experience before that, so if you don't have like any part-time jobs or any customer service or anything like that, then you can still highlight what you've done in school. So during that section there where we chatted about your experience, instead of highlighting the jobs that you have, if you don't have any, you can highlight the project name of a project that you worked on. So for example, if you made a marketing plan in your like in your marketing 101 class, you could use like a marketing plan for IBM company. It was a student project. And then you could briefly in that first sentence under your role, you could basically say, I was a student and working on a team of 4. Our objective was to come up with a marketing strategy for a company and to help them solve this problem. And then that's your quick little what you did on the project. And then your 3 little bullet points underneath are going to be how you did it. So it could be that you guys made a presentation, that you had to do like a survey, or you had to do outreach, you had to do research, whatever it is that you did on that project, you can still highlight those in your bullet points. And so those are really good because, I mean, you go through 2 years of school or 4 years of school for a reason, because you're doing all these projects that help you and are making you equipped for the job. So you definitely want to highlight them there, because that is what you've been working on for the last couple of years and what you've been putting your effort in. So definitely feel free to throw those on your resume under the experience section. And if you do have like some part-time experience growing up or anything like that, you can always throw those in too, because again, they're likely customer service experience jobs or retail or any kind of customer facing role, which will still help you in the job. So feel free to throw those on there too.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's another great thing to look out, just to add to that, is like a lot of organizations do hackathons and stuff like that. So being kind of taking the time to see what's out there and gaining experience in those. And that's a good segue, because DeepSense, we do those. We have data challenges that we do with students. So basically, we present you with a challenge. You have to use some data to solve the challenge. You can work on a team, you can work solo, and then there's a prize at the end, but it's also just great experience just to think a little bit differently maybe, or think more creatively, or work on a team and learn from others. We actually have a data challenge coming up in February, so keep an eye on our social media for that. And that's another thing you can add to your resume.
Yeah, good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because we have very similar kind of like competitions like that too. But on school, like on campus or in your classes and stuff, there is a lot of like extracurricular activities that people will do. So sometimes people will do like, they'll join a society and they will be like, I know Enactus is a really popular one. A lot of people will put their Enactus experience on their resume, because even though it was, they might not have been getting paid, or maybe they were, or even if you were on like a debating club or something like that, you can highlight those things on your resume, because again, that was your time that you were devoting to a society or to a club. And at the end of the day, you're getting those hands-on skills, you're learning, you're really kind of like growing your skill set that you have. And so you'll want to put those things on your resume too. You can put those under experience, or if you want, you can make an extracurricular subject line, and you can put some of the clubs you were on, what you did. But again, just make sure that you highlight the most relevant things. So if you did a hackathon, or I know IBM and RBC hosts Innovation Challenge every year, and that helps use like some different skills that you don't typically learn in your classes. So
Sure.
it would basically be like making up a project, coming up with a solution. So those are things that you'll want to put on your resume in either or spot, and then keep your bullets basically concise and relevant to the job about what you did. So great point. Thanks for bringing that up.
Another question. So let's say you've applied for a job and you don't hear back. What is like the appropriate time to like follow up on application, or to kind of know that they've gone a different direction? Because a lot of times companies look at hundreds of applications and they can't get back to everyone. So what's kind of like the best procedure for that?
That's a really good question. And I can speak a little bit to my experience with this, just because we at IBM, we have an application process. And so basically every time you apply for a job, you actually have to apply through our like IBM portal. And so basically like what it does is that you originally apply for the job, and then it shows you like each step of the way that you're at. So it could show you like applied, resume being screened, resume like under review. And then it could say interview. And then it could say waiting results. And then it could say offer, or it could say disposition, or like went with another candidate, or any of those things. So if you are applying to a job and the company does have an application system like that, where you apply and you can kind of see your progress along the way, that's definitely where you want to go first, because that will have all of your up-to-date data, instead of like emailing the recruiter or calling the recruiter. If you can, first look yourself to see if you checked where you applied, or your online portal, whatever it is for the companies, so that you can see the status of your application. Most companies have those, a lot of the big companies does. So make sure that you go there first so that you can see where your application's at in the process. Because sometimes it can take a long time for your resume to get reviewed. Sometimes things are slow, especially especially if there's a bunch of people applying. So you really have to keep an eye on that. But if it is a smaller company, or if it's a company that isn't using one of those systems, the appropriate timeline for after you do an interview, typically people will know, like the hiring team or the interviewers will know who they want to move forward with for an offer about a week afterwards. So if you don't hear back within a week, I would follow up either if you have their emails or if you have their phone number, or where you applied to the job. Typically you're either sending your resume to an email or you're sending it to an application system. So get the contact there just to see what the status is, because most companies will tell you if you've been selected or if you haven't been selected, and they'll give you like, if you want to know like feedback or anything like that from your interview, or if you want some tips to help you find another job, they're more than happy to share that information. But yeah, a week is like a good timeline. Sometimes it can be a little bit more, again, if you're hiring a lot of people, but I wouldn't follow up any earlier than a week, but I would definitely, like, you should get your results back within a week and a half. Hopefully I'm not putting any companies on blast here that that might not do that, but usually within a week or a week and a half is a good time to see if you haven't heard back, potentially that you didn't get the job, but they could still be making decisions. So always good to follow up just so that you have your answer and that you know what you did well and how to help you find another job.
Awesome. One of the questions we have is, how often do you hire students for internships who aren't in formal co-op programs?
Yeah, good question. I think it's different probably for every company. For IBM, I'm not sure if I haven't actually hired those students yet. So this will be my first time doing it this summer. And so it is still like a summer job. So it is still a job that's from May to the end of August. It is called like a co-op. So typically people are finishing up their school within April or May, and they're going back in September. And I think you do need to have either like college or university experience, just because it is only that 4 months. So that would be ideal for people who only have 4 months off in the year before they go back to school. But if you are still interested and you don't have a degree, that doesn't mean you can't apply to IBM. You can still apply to IBM, but you might actually want a job that's longer than 4 months long. So you can actually just apply to our other roles that we have on our website and see what ones don't require a degree or a diploma. And so, because you might probably want a job for longer than a couple of months, so you can actually go and look at those jobs first. So yeah, typically we do hire university or college students for our 4-month co-ops. But if you are interested, definitely feel free to reach out to the recruiter and see kind of like what they typically hire for, what they're like, what they have the demand to hire for, how many, maybe they can hire someone extra if you're just interested in working 4 months of the summer. And then maybe you're going into your first year of school or something like that. Or maybe you're going to try out another job if you're not in school. Definitely, it doesn't hurt to reach out just to see if that is an option.
Mm-hmm. I think we have time for just one more question. So this one is someone who is in applied computer science looking for tech jobs, but has taken management courses. So should they be mentioning those management projects or the management projects they've done in those courses?
So they're looking for a tech job, but they've only taken management courses.
But they've also, I think they've taken also like tech courses and management courses. So is it worthwhile kind of highlighting the other courses you've taken that aren't directly related to the position?
Good question. Good question. And I think this is a really good thing to kind of think about, because we're always saying like include the relevant stuff, but management could still be relevant to your role, because if you're applying to IBM, for example, we're a company that only works on projects. So we always work for clients. So at the end of the day, everybody is a consultant. So if you have taken management courses, you've likely learned a little bit about project management, or you've likely learned a little bit about kind of the relationship of working with another team, what it's like to kind of be working with multiple other teams, and how one team might rely on the other team in order to get their information. So like proper etiquette, and kind of making sure that everyone's working with timelines and things like that. So if you are applying, this is an example for IBM, I would include the management courses that you've taken. Again, you don't need to go into detail. You could probably just say like, you don't have to go and list like 3 of the management courses you've had. I would just say like, have taken management courses, and highlight the main things that you've learned that will help you with the job. So for example, throughout your management courses, if you've learned a little bit about project management, that would be really good for me as a recruiter to see, because I now know that you are looking for a tech job, but you also understand what project management is, or you understand some management concepts. So you understand what it's like to work with other teams, to kind of be able to manage relationships. So that for me would be really great to see that you are looking for a tech job, but you also have an understanding of management, so that you are really going to know what it's like to work on a client project and what it's going to be like to manage that relationship between IBM and the client. So yes, I would include them. You don't need to go into detail if you've taken like 5 of them. Just say you've taken management courses, and then also say you've taken tech courses, and then that kind of gets the best of both worlds.
Yeah, for sure. I think being able to highlight kind of a diverse set of skills is your best bet. So another question we had was, they heard that it's good to have a minor in mathematics for jobs, and we're curious if that's true. But I would say it's depends on the job, but also depends a lot on how you sell yourself and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, the key point really is like, you can have a wide background of skills, and even if some of them aren't always relevant, maybe if it's the only thing that you have, you just want to put everything on there if you don't have much. At the end of the day, if it's not super relevant, but you're still selling yourself as someone who is willing to learn, someone who's willing to take feedback, and someone that, you know, can take what you do know and the wide experience that you have and apply it in a different setting. Really, the way you sell yourself is what's going to kind of make or break you from getting that job. So you could have like all of the math experience in the world, but you don't really know how to kind of work with teams and kind of apply this on the job, then you're not going to be put ahead of someone else who maybe doesn't have any math experience, but is really good at working on teams, is really keen on learning new things. They're always looking for feedback on how they can improve. That person's probably going to get the job, even though they don't have as many kind of technical hands-on skills. They're obviously more open to growing themselves, learning new things, and being able to advance their role. So they're going to be the ones that get that opportunity. So yeah, definitely selling yourself is a really key part in your resume and in your interview process, and really making it personal and making you kind of stand out over, because a lot of people applying have typically the same background. So that really is what's going to help you stand out at the end of the day.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. Is there, if people had, like, can people contact you on LinkedIn if they had follow-up questions?
I'll put my LinkedIn in the chat here. And yeah, you guys can use some of the LinkedIn tips that we just chatted about.
There you go. Yeah, it's always, we always say, yeah, it's always good to send a message whenever you connect with anyone on LinkedIn, and not just like go out and click connect with a bunch of different people, but kind of connect with purpose and with the reason specifically.
Yes, exactly. Especially like where this event is a really good example. So I do all kinds of these events. So I do these events often. So if someone's just reaching out and they have a question, I might not even know what event they came from. Like I could have met them months ago, maybe I met them this morning. So it's really good to say what event you were at, because typically recruiters do a couple of events like a month, maybe even more, maybe less. So yeah, really definitely when you're sending a message, make sure that it's clear where you met them from and what you want to know. So yeah, I'm glad we went back to LinkedIn. So everyone hopefully was taking good notes.
Yeah. So now put them to the test.
Yeah. So I put oh, actually, I don't think I sent the LinkedIn to everybody. I think it just went to the host.
Yeah, just the host. Yep. There you go. Now everyone should have it.
I just put my LinkedIn in the chat there for everybody.
Perfect. Yeah, and so these discovery sessions, we try to do them every month, and we actually have one next week with a colleague of yours, Rick Power. So we definitely encourage everyone to attend that. Rick has been working in the tech industry for over 30 years, so he has loads of experience to share. So that's happening on Tuesday at 2 o'clock Atlantic time. I'll drop the link to that Eventbrite if you are interested in joining and getting to kind of pick the brain of Rick, because he has a lot of great insight, great experience. So we definitely encourage folks to sign up for that as well. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we are recording this and it's going to be uploaded to our YouTube, where we have all our other discovery sessions all set up. So I'll share the link for our discovery session playlist. I encourage people to go check out kind of related to this. It's called Email Writing by Dr. Dawn Henwood. And that's another great discovery session, kind of helping you learn the best way to contact people, how to write emails and really be efficient. So another great tool to add to your like career roster and all the skills you need for sure. And then DeepSense, we always share job postings and great events on our social media. So make sure to follow us. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, of course. So you can reach out to us on any of those platforms. And Andrea, do you have anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, maybe I'll plug in our link to the IBM Careers website in case anybody wants to check those out. And if you want to do some practice, you can look at the job descriptions that we have there and see how you can tailor your resume to it and kind of take what we learned today and some of those tips that we had about highlighting some of those keywords, and then see if you can practice with your resume and see what you have so far. So yeah, I'll definitely share our IBM Careers page specifically here in Bedford, but if you're not in Bedford, you can just click on the careers home and you can still find them from there. So I'll throw that in the chat. And I also see some people asking for the slides. So yeah, I can definitely share those as well. So maybe we can work after the event or something and see if we can send those out through an email or something. Because yeah, in sure. Case I know it was a lot to digest and a lot of points. So yeah, it's definitely good to be able to see it afterwards as a refresher. Or I guess you could just go check out the YouTube too, because the YouTube will have the full slide deck and the presentation. So maybe that actually probably would be the better route. So yeah, use the links in the chat then for the YouTube, because that'll have what we said and then also the slides. So yeah, feel free to check out IBM and you guys can message me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. And other than that, I just wanted to thank you all for the time today. I'm glad there were so many people here to join and wanting to learn about how to grow your resume, how to help you in an interview, and kind of how to help you bring you to some future career success. So hopefully you all learned something today, and hopefully it is beneficial for you. And you can always check out the YouTube and join some more DeepSense events if you're looking for more information like this, or looking to learn more about IBM. Definitely check out the session with Rick. I work with Rick a lot, and he gives me new information all the time too. So I can only imagine that he will give lots of valuable information next week or in 2 weeks, whenever it is. So thanks everybody for the time today, and best of luck with everybody if you're in school with the last semester and probably finding jobs here soon. So best of luck, everyone. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your time. And I dropped the link to our student pool again in the chat for anyone who's interested in doing an internship or a project with DeepSense. Definitely apply for that. And yeah, we went a bit over time, but I think we had a lot of valuable information there. So thanks for your time, and thanks to everyone who attended. Hope you guys all have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.